Welcome everyone, it's Donelle McAdams and Megan here for our 2 p.m. live on Saturday. We call it live at 5 because we're on the East Coast and it's 5 o'clock. So we're going to get started today, and it's going to be just a little different today because I've had a lot of questions this week, and I just really thought that it would be a good idea to answer some of these questions, because if one person has them, at least probably 10 or 12 have them too. So we're going to start out by doing some of the questions that I've had throughout the week, and then we're going to hit the ones. So now, those of you that have submitted questions, we have those questions and we'll address those, so don't get panicky because we're going to hit them. But for those of you that haven't put up a question and need an answer to a question, please go ahead and write some of those questions down in here, because I'm sure as we talk, it's going to give you an idea of something that maybe you wish you had asked. And Megan's watching those questions, and she's going to be writing them down so we can try and get to all of them today. So without much else, I'm going to go ahead. Please understand that we're here for you. So if you have a question about a process we're doing, let me know. I'm going to first talk about care of your machine, and you'll notice I've got my needle plate off of my machine here today, because this is one of the things that I find people tend to neglect, and then it becomes a problem that you can't really resolve yourself, and you got to get it taken to the shop. But I can tell you that it's really not that hard to take care of your machine so that you can continue to sew without having a lot of, I hate to call it downtime, but sometimes that's what it is called. So I'm just going to move this just a little bit over to the side here, and I'm going to make that picture just a little bit bigger. So the first thing I want to talk about is, first of all, you need to check your manual to see how yours comes off. So in the case of mine, I'm just going to stick this back on there. Mine is magnetic, and all I have to do is push a button on my machine, on my screen, and it lifts by itself, and I take it off of there. Now, some of your machines, you may have to use a tool. Some of them you may use a screwdriver, but just make sure you know what you're supposed to do, because you can damage your machine if you don't. Now, one of the best things to use, obviously, is some sort of a little brush. And I was cleaning mine out earlier when it dawned on me, hey, why don't you wait and show them how it's done? So I've already used the brush part, but now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a a Q-tip, and I'm going to go down in this area right here, and I am going to just kind of swab that. So you can see, even though I'd used a brush, let me put it over here on the white, you can see I still got some stuff out of there. And then right around this edge here, I'm just going to take that and I'm going to rub around that and get that off. And then what you want to do is you want to look to see if your machine, and some of you are going to say, my store told me never to do anything like that. Trust me, I have been a repair person for 37 years, and I'm not going to tell you something that's going to hurt your machine. But I am going to tell you, you got to listen to all that I say, not just part of what I say. Right here on my machine, this little piece right there in the center is actually a little wick. And that little wick would be lubricated by your repair person. Now, I'm just going to tell you, you can put a little bit. Mine is called Tri-Flow oil, and this is a very clean lubricant. You never, ever want to use anything like WD-40 or something like that. This is Tri-Flow oil, and I have a little spout here that I'm just going to put 2 drops in there. That's all I'm going to put. And right around this edge here, where my hook fits. Now, if yours doesn't look like this, then you're not going to do any of this because it doesn't look like this. But this hook fits right in there, and this opening is going to go up that direction. But right on this little ridge right here, you're going to put just a little drop, 1 drop. And that's going to make that little ridge so that when I put this piece back in place, and I need to make sure you can see, if you're looking real close, there's a little red dot there. This piece here has a little arrow, and that dot and that line up, and you can see That's just going to hug right up in there. Now I pushed it too far, so I've got to lift it up and take that back out, because in trying to show you that, I've put it in incorrectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm lifting it back up and I'm putting it in so that now when I get that laid right back in there, you can see there's just a little bit of play there. Before, when I had that, when I was just a second ago, I had pushed it too far, but there's just that little bit of play there, and that little drop of oil, I don't care if you put it on that side or you put it over on this side, it's going to end up, because this stays in place and the hook underneath there moves around. So I don't want you doing this, but I want you to watch what happens when I hold on to this. You can see that that's going back and forth. So that's going to lubricate that area there. And I can tell you, in all the years that I've worked with doing repairs, I have had people call me right after they got their machine home, and they'll tell me, oh my gosh, Donelle, that machine was noisier than ever. What did you do? And I said, I cleaned it too good, I guess. And so I talked them through what I just showed you, one little drop. And those of you that have been my customers in the past, you know you've been through this before sometimes. And so one little drop will eliminate all that noise, and it'll make this run much more smoothly. So I don't know if any of you have any questions on that, but this is for top loading machines only. The front loaders are totally different. I can't show it to you because I don't have one here. But that is just a little bit about how to keep that in there and keep it lubricated. You can see that this just sits right in there, and this is that little ring around the edge there. This is a little kind of a U-shape opening, and that's going to go straight in there and just set down so that it's just like this. Now the other thing I left in here is some nasty lint, because I wanted you to see what happens. Back here, your feed teeth get lint in between them. And so as I use this pointed piece here, you can see me pulling that out from between those teeth. I want to get that out away from there. I want to check the next one. You can use just a straight pin, but you can see in this last one I got a big piece. That will keep your feed teeth from working when you bring them back up. Because if you have lint buildup in there, when I put this piece back in place, that lint will serve as a pad, so to speak. And so people will say, you know, my feed teeth just don't seem to be working at all. And it's like, they're not, because you got too much lint buildup in there.
So we got a couple questions about that. Dee says she puts a drop on the wick but not the rim because her shop says to not do it.
Well, she can follow the shop. You know, I can just tell you that it won't hurt anything and it will quiet down. This piece here is not plastic. It's what's called carbon fiber, and it gets a little dry, so to speak, and it creates a little static electricity. So this piece and the metal piece that it's sitting into don't like each other, so they chatter. They just like to do this, and if you just put that one little drop of lubricant there, they just stay right together. So
when talking about the lubricant, Lillian wants to know, is extra fine machine oil okay?
If it's sewing machine oil, yes. Yes. Okay.
And then where can they find that oil? Carol wants to know if we sell it or where
yeah, we do sell this. We do sell the Tri-Flow. This is a great sewing machine lubricant. It's also great for your...
Let me get it in the screen. Show us again.
I'm sorry. Mine is a little bit old, so this is hard to see, but it says Tri-Flow on it. TRI-Flow. Some of your like hardwares that are just like your home hardwares, maybe an Ace Hardware even, something like that, they may have this, but this is a Tri-Flow lubricant, and the thing that's nice about it is some lubricants or oils will attract your lint, your grease, or not grease, but your lint and your fuzz and your thread pieces and all of that, and they just make it all nasty. Whereas this evaporates. As it's used, it evaporates. You can see I've had mine since 2015. So, but it's great for your sergers too, for those of you that have to lubricate your sergers. So again, I don't want you doing anything that causes any problems for your machine, but I'll bet you're going to find that if you just did that right there on that little piece, it's going to quiet your machine down and it's going to run a whole lot smoother. So since that's all clean, this is put back together. You're going to just make sure you know how you took it apart, because some of you have more parts than I do to put back together. And all I have to do is lay this back in place, and now everything is back to the way it's supposed to be. Question?
Yes, Rhonda would like to know, should you try and get fluff from under the bobbin holder?
Get it from wherever you can, easy enough. Some people take like a, oh help me.
Well, she also said that she uses a pipe cleaner.
That's what I'm going for.
Okay.
Take a pipe cleaner, because that has a bunch of places. It's kind of like using a little brush that you would, use to clean your house, but it's a miniaturized version of it. And a pipe cleaner is a great thing. A lot of people take a pipe cleaner, take about 4 inches, double it back on itself so it's only like 2 inches, and stick it into the end of a straw. So it makes like a little paddle on the end. It's kind of like a little rounded shape, and you can just get down there. But just make sure you don't move anything that's not supposed to be moved. Another thing that's good is if you have, and I didn't think about getting this out, but if you have one of those sets that's like a cleaner for attaching to your regular sweeper, it's like a reducer, and it has a little tiny edge you can get down there, and you can get those pieces out also. So that's a good thing too. I sometimes use canned air, like on my serger, I use canned air, but a lot of times all that does is blow it farther into your machine. So it's better to get as much as you can out with something that's going to suction it out rather than push it farther back into the machine.
Sherry has a great question. How often should you lubricate your machine?
That's really, I would say if you're using your machine, let's just throw out there 10 hours a week. It's probably good to make it part of your habit on whatever day. Saturday maybe is cleaning day, and so you're going to give yourself give it a little bit there. If you're only using your machine maybe 3 hours a week, you could skip it. But I would say every 10 to 12 hours is a good way to gauge just giving it a good cleaning like that. I'm going to show you a tool, because again, we're doing hints and tips. Some of you may have this. This is a tool that's made by Ginger, and if I put it right up there, I think you can see that. Is that better? There we go. Ginger is the company that makes scissors, great sewing machine scissors. There's a lot of different ones out there. But this is a tool that supposedly they don't make anymore. It's called a burling tool, B-U-R-L-I-N-G. But this end of it, down here, I'm using a new piece of equipment, and so I'm getting the orders how to do it. This end down here, as you can see when I turn it this way, is very, very pointed. It's tweezers because it's wide like that, but it's very sharp. And the other day, I had to take out some stitches on an embroidery, and all I had to do was lay my embroidery down. Of course, the stabilizer was on there, and I just kind of picked at it just like this, and it just broke, because these are very, very sharp. It's almost like a razor blade there. And then the other end is an awl, so it's very, very pointed. This is a tool that I have over in my little It's Sewema clutch that many of you have seen, where I stick all my tools. And I always make sure that this has got its safety protector on this end. Now, I had it open because I was cleaning out those feed teeth, but this is one that is great for embroidery. It's also great for use when picking out stitches. Last week's project, I had one little design. You guys remember the struggle I had on one of those small little turning. It had 8 different turns on it, and so I had to pick that out. This was like the easiest thing in the world to pick those out with this. Now, the reason I say that, like I said, my understanding is they don't make them anymore. Sometimes somebody comes upon them, and you'll find them on eBay. This would be one that you would want to invest in if you can. I can tell you this is around $30, $35. But it's worth every penny of it. And I just wanted to show it to you in case you might have one. Maybe somebody passed it down to you. I can remember the last time, about 6 years ago, I found about 6 of these, and I think I could have auctioned them off to the highest bidder, because it was like, wow, they were wanting them so bad. So that's something if you have one. And if you do have one out there, give us a thumbs up or something so we can kind of see, some people that might have some of those tools, just because we're interested. We'd like to know what you have. So that's my little bit on cleaning the machine as far as keeping the lint and the fuzz and everything out down there. And it is one of those things that if you have a machine in good working order, you won't have issues as you're working.
Linda wants to know what that Ginger tool is called again, and I'm afraid I probably wouldn't spell it right.
I think it's called the Burling, B-U-R-L-I-N-G, and I want to say it was Nipper, N-I-P-P-E-R, or just the Burling tool. And it's funny because you might go into a sewing store and ask them, they'll go, oh yeah, we got one of those back here. Nobody's ever asked for it before. And so, you know, it's just a really good tool to have. All right, the other thing I saw this week, and it may not even have been on one of the Westerly or Sew Study sites, I don't know, but it talked about how to keep your templates clean. How do we clean our templates? And so I tried to find one of mine that was really nasty, and I couldn't because I've cleaned it. But I'm going to show you this one right here. This is just one of my regular templates. I think we'll go over this way, Megan, so we got more room. So this is just one of my regular templates from my sampler set. And so what I'm going to do is, I think we might need that other light on, I don't know. I'm going to pull this piece off. I'm going to pull this piece off here of stable tape, and people talk about it leaving a lot of residue. Now I don't see that there's a lot of residue on there, but there is a little bit. If I kind of get in a little bit of that light there, there's a little bit of that residue. And so you have a couple of ways that you can clean it. Megan, if you want to hand me a piece of paper towel there. Two things you can use. This will work perfect, okay? The Tri-Flow oil will clean that off. So I'm just putting a little bit on the corner there, and I'm just coming over here and I'm going to rub, and you can see that that came right off. I'll put it there in the glare, and you can see that that little bit of residue came right off. Another thing that you can do is you can use, some people use alcohol. I'm not really fond of that. I just don't know how it interacts with the acrylics, but you can also use what's called citrus power remover. And this is for removing like ink and all different kinds of things from a lot of different surfaces. And again, this is something that I sell. You probably can find it some other places, but I always feel like if it's something that I know is difficult to find, I'm going to carry it because I don't want you sewers out there wasting all your time running around hunting products when you could be sewing. So this is already off of there and it's all nice and clean, but all I would have done, I would not have sprayed it onto the template. I would have simply taken the cap off and done the same thing, just sprayed a little bit. Now you can see this one is clear and it's not really going to matter because it's already clean there. But I'm just going to wipe that off, and then as soon as I do that, I'm going to turn it around because I don't want to leave any residue on there, and I'm going to wipe that off. So that's two things that you can use to clean your templates. Now, personally, I feel like there's always just a little tiny bit of a residue on there, so I usually just take a little tiny bit of soap on a cloth or on a paper towel, and I just kind of wipe that off and wipe it so it's again, because I don't want any of that oil remaining on any of my templates that could then get onto my fabrics. So I saw a little bit there, so I want to wipe that off. I don't want it on there.
So Kim wants to know, could you use Goo Gone?
I'm sure you can. It's just a little bit, you know, heavier or whatever, you know, you can use Goo Gone. Just want to make sure that it doesn't damage acrylics.
So, like vegetable oil, baby oil, peanut butter, those
probably anything that's going to take that off. If it's something that you use, like, for example, don't use fingernail polish remover. But if it's something that you use to get the sticky off of something you purchase, it's probably going to be fine for the acrylics.
Lemon oil?
I'm not familiar with using that one, so I won't say, but I'm sure not going to say that it's not right because it could very well be just perfect. So.
And then since we're on the process of cleaning, how can you clean permanent marker off of your template?
I have been told that that's where they use the alcohol.
Okay.
So I think I saw where Pam Varner put on Westerly by Me something this week that she used alcohol to get the marks if you have permanent marks on your template.
And you used a paper towel, and Opal was wondering, does that scratch the template?
No.
Okay.
No. That's not, I mean, you can use I get towels at the dollar store,
Those microfiber?
the microfiber towels, those work fine too. So, good questions. Anything else on cleaning the templates?
Not yet, but they're coming in. So.
Okay. All right. Now, another thing I'm going to address while we're here, because I saw this on another website, because if you took my phone and looked at Facebook, you would certainly know that I was definitely involved with quilting, because there's not hardly anything else on it. And so on one of the other sites, I saw someone who was having all kinds of issues with some piecing problems. And I can honestly tell you, even without having the piece in my hand, just looking at the pictures, most likely what the problem was, and some of you may have seen this also, was that she had wound her bobbin too fast. So for those of you that are get your foot on the pedal and fly, that's not going to work for bobbin winding. You need to wind it at a medium speed. So whenever I was teaching school, and I was teaching the middle school kids, because I believe when you start them at that age, you need to support everything you're doing with facts that are going to carry them through life, because they may never take it again. Some of you probably never had home economics or a sewing class after your 8th grade year. So what I had my kids do is I would give them like 12 inches of thread. So let's say we've got 12 inches of thread here, and I would wrap it around they would wrap it around their finger until only 6 inches was between. So I'm coming down here, and I'm measuring it right on my front of my table. You can't see it, but right there is 6 inches of thread from side to side. And if I take this 6 inches of thread and I've got it wrapped around my fingers and I pull, I don't think you probably could necessarily see it there, but I pulled that a good 1/4 of an inch. And you're probably wondering, so what? Big deal, Donelle. It is a big deal, because this is what happens when you wind your bobbin too fast. That thread stretches. So if I pulled that a 1/4 of an inch, over 12 inches, that's a 1/2 inch, and you can do the math. Because that thread stays stretched on there. Your bobbin may even have heated up and become out of sorts, and you might not even have been able to hardly get it off of the bobbin winder, or it might even have blew its top. In other words, it just got so hot the whole top blew off of there. Now I've pulled this and I'm still pulling on it, okay? So I'm not letting go of this at this point, because I'm treating this just like you wound that thread on there 3 years ago. And now it gets back into a project, and it's kind of like, if y'all can remember, I know some of you are my age, but you can remember wearing pantyhose every single day, and when you would take them off, they just kind of went back to their normal shape. And that's, you'd launder them, and then they would, be back to what they were, and then you stretch them out, and then they go back. This is the same thing with thread, only it only has one direction to go. And so if you have, and in the case of the project that I saw, she probably had wound the bobbin too fast, so when this gets stitched back into the project and it relaxes, it pulls that seam back in. And no matter what you do, it is not going to change. It's just going to pull that back so that your fabric just scrunches up. So I just really encourage you to not wind your bobbin at a high rate of speed. It does make a huge difference. And the other thing is, when you're winding it, make sure you've got it through the right pieces on your machine, the right points, so that it gets the right tension on the bobbin. Because, for example, if I push this over here, well, I don't know that I can show you this, but right on top of my machine is what I put it around for my bobbin winding, and that's actually a tension. There's 2 discs. One like this and one on top of it, and between it is where you're supposed to put your thread. Well, if you don't get it in between there, it's not going to be the right tension. If you just lay it on top, it's just going to be real loose, and then that will cause you tension problems. And it's so surprising, some of these things, and that's why I really wanted to take some time to answer these, because I'm seeing issues come up on different sites and even on ours, and it's causing, you problems that it's just not hard to remedy them.
Claudine says that her machine winds automatically, and it does go very fast.
And you can't slow that down with a speed control? Most machines you can slow down the bobbin winding with the speed control.
So you are suggesting that if it is going fast, to slow it down?
Yeah, if it's going fast, slow it down. Because, and I understand what you're saying, but some machines have the option of you can either press on the pedal at the speed you decide, or you can touch a button. But if you have the option to touch the button, most likely you have a speed control on your machine to slow that down. Now, I will tell you, if it winds and you've got it threaded correctly and it's got its own mind to it, so to speak, and that may be what you're saying, Claudine, it probably is set up to wind at the optimum speed. So if you've got it threaded correctly, you've got it through the right points, you're probably not going to have any issues. But I can remember, I don't know, since I've had my store for 37 years, this was probably at least 25 years ago, I put a little thing in my newsletter, and this is back when you actually sat down and hand typed a newsletter, and I put a little bit of information in there about bobbin winding, and I had this lady come in, and she happened to be the mother a mother of a good friend of mine from school, and I knew she was a very, very expert garment sewer. And she came in and she said, I just want to tell you, you have changed my life. And I thought, what on earth have I done? And she said, all of the issues that I have been fighting for years had to do with bobbin winding. She said, when you put that in there and I changed that, she said, I got my tensions back to normal. I didn't have to adjust my tension. And so I hope that this will help you and make it something that makes it easier for you. So that's my little bit on bobbin winding. Obviously, as thread is being talked about, we've talked a lot about different weights of thread and needles, and I'm seeing an awful lot of information pop up on that. And so throw me your questions, because needle size matters, thread size matters.
This really isn't a question. I would probably call this a testimonial, but Rhonda said that she had tension problems this week, couldn't figure out what was wrong, and changed the bobbin, and it worked fine.
Right, and a lot of times that does. And I've had people bring in 2 bobbins from the same machine, and I don't have 2 of them out here, but I've had them bring in 2 bobbins from the same machine, and they'll say, look at this bobbin here, it's like that much taller. And it is. And it's because this in the center got hot, and so that's why I say popped its top, it got taller, and when you put that in the machine, you're not only going to have issues with it, you're going to have bad, the threads coming off there the wrong way because the bobbin is too tall. So if you ever have a bobbin that acts up like that and you know that it's, not the right height, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Yes?
I've got one more. Hold on just a moment. I lost it for a second. Mary has a new to her applique and is having problems with the bobbins winding too loose. So does that mean she's winding it too slow?
Okay, if you're having bobbins that are winding too loose, especially because I know the applique, I would say that you're not threading it correctly. And so I would be more than happy to FaceTime with you. So leave your information and we'll do a FaceTime and I'll show you what you need to know, because that machine will wind the bobbin from the top or it winds through the needle. And for any of you out there that have a machine that winds through the needle, that's a fine thing to do, but I would recommend that you not have the thread in the eye of the needle, and make sure you have on a metal foot that thread can go through. Don't just go from the top of that last thread guide at the top of the needle, and don't put it through the eye of the needle, because that's damaging the eye of the needle. Just take the thread and put it through the foot. So for example, if I was winding a bobbin here with my ruler foot, I would have my needle. You can see that it's not threaded right now. This would be on there, and my thread would come from this particular right up here. I'm going to see if I can get closer to you. There we go. I would have this particular piece right there be the last place the thread went through, and then I would just have this end going through the foot and coming out underneath, and then I would go over to my winder. Now this particular machine does not wind that way. It only winds on the top. So I can't do that, but if you have a machine that winds through the foot, don't wind it with the thread in the needle eye. Just make sure it goes through a metal foot, and never use a plastic foot, because that will make after time, there'll be friction on that, and it will make a little slot in the side of your foot that your thread seems to always want to go there, and it'll start ripping your thread. So you'll have to replace your foot. So that's a good question regarding if it's too loose. That just means it's not threaded the way it was intended, and we call that a squishy bobbin. It's kind of like when you press on it, it's just real squishy, and that will give you tension issues too. So great question, but give me the information so we can do
And we've got a couple others who've said that, so they all should just send you information.
Send me an email, and we'll set up a FaceTime, because honestly it'll only take us probably 5 minutes to solve that problem.
So Carol wants to know, would popping the top also happen on a metal bobbin?
I don't know. I've not had that. I only have one machine that uses metal bobbins, and I've never had any issues. So I have a metal bobbin right here, but I've never had any issues with that. Okay, any other questions on that? All right, I started to talk about thread because I said that's been a hot issue out there, knowing that we need to have the right size needle with our thread and all of that kind of thing. The only thing I really want to tell you right now is I had somebody ask me about this particular thread, and I said, where's it at? Where did you buy it at? And she said, I do not remember. I don't know. I just wondered what you think of this thread. I said, well, I've never heard of it. So I did a little research and found out it's what Hobby Lobby sells. So I went down and got myself a couple spools, and it works great. I have not had any problems. It happens to be a 50 weight thread. It's called Sewology. This is a Pima cotton, and there's 1,200 yards on a spool, and they have quite a selection of it. Like I said, I'd never heard of it, but it's worked really, really well. I've not had breakage problems. I actually got 2 spools because the school colors around here happen to be purple is one of them, and so I was doing some masks, so I thought, well, I'll try it in 2 different ways, and so I have had no problems with that whatsoever. So that answers somebody's question out there. I don't recall whose it was, and it may not even have been on this site, but I wanted to share that information with you because sometimes, you know, you have a thread that you don't know where you got and nobody knows about it, but like I said, I did a little research and found out that it came from Hobby Lobby. It was their brand of thread. Now, I'm going to show you on this how I put a bobbin in. In this particular machine, and on most drop-in bobbins, they go counterclockwise. So when it's laying in there, it's going to spin counterclockwise. I use one of my fingers or a thumb, and I hold this in place, and I switch my fingers, and I'm holding that so I can hear the little, I don't know if they could hear that or not, but I could hear that real plainly. So it pops into place. On this particular machine, it comes right down here, and there's a cutter. And so I can go ahead and just cut that thread off. And that way, because I held my finger or my thumb on it, I know that it is in that tension the way it's supposed to be. So if you have questions, you know, it's kind of funny because you can sit a person who has sewn all their life, you can sit them down in front of a sewing machine and they can pretty much figure out how to do, you know, threading and all that because it's pretty simple. It's pretty much the same. You start at the top, you work your way down, you go back up through the take-up lever, but you want to make sure that you're threading your machine the way it's supposed to be so that you don't have any issues or problems. And I may have told you this story, but I'm going to tell you again because this is the funniest thing, but it's true. We were taught when I started learning about how to do repairs to look for the simplest thing first. And usually that's bad thread or a bad needle. or a needle that's put in incorrectly, or a needle that's not designed for that machine. So just as a matter of information, I had a man who was a quilter, and I'm only saying that because everybody out there can understand the temperament that will be involved when I make the phone call to the guy, okay? So he brought in his machine. He said, it's skipping stitches. It won't pick up. It's doing all this, and I don't understand. And I just had it in here 3 months ago, and you know how the story goes. And so I said, okay, I'll take a look at it. And he said, well, I don't have the time to wait. And I wanted to say, well, I don't have time to do it right now anyway, but I didn't say that. I said, okay, well, I'll give you a call and let you know when it's ready. Well, it was later that evening, and I thought, well, I'm just going to take a quick look at this machine, because sometimes I need to sleep on a problem. Like, I need to know what the problem is, then I got to sleep on it, figure out what's going on. Well, this one I didn't have to sleep on, because the only problem was he had the needle in backwards. And so when I called, I just said, hey, it's no problem. I said, or actually, he came in to pick it up. And I said, it was no big deal. I'm not even going to charge you. I said, you had your needle in backwards. He goes, it had to be more than that. I don't do stupid things like that. And he just went on and on and on. And I said, you know what? It's $89, and here's what the problem was. And I made up a bunch of stuff. And he said, I'll take your word for it. My needle was in backwards. And so we both had a good laugh. And, you know, it's just sometimes we just do something that's just not the right thing. And so sometimes it's just the kamikaze approach. You kind of have to just take out the thread, rethread it, take out the bobbin, rethread that, and maybe check the needle and see what's going on, because, you know, it just happens. I mean, there's just things that happen, and sometimes you're like, I know I didn't do that. I did not do something like that. Well, guess what? Maybe you did, and, you know, if it's a simple problem, just accept that you did something, you know, and move on. So I know it happens. It happens more and more as we get a little bit older, too. So those are the things that I had on my list that I had seen this week. Now I'm going to hit the things that I had in the questions.
I have one on thread before you move on.
All righty.
Janice asks, can you piece with bottom line thread?
You know, I don't know, is that 50 weight thread or 60 weight thread? Because if so, yeah, you can do that. The only thing you don't want to do is, I've had people, and I'm going to reach back here and get a couple spools of thread. So I got 2 cones of thread here, okay? And we're just going to say it's cone thread. And so I've had people who say, well, I just used a cone thread. Well, guess what, guys? This is a serger thread. And this is only 2-ply thread, which means only 2 strands of thread were twisted together. So it's just not as strong.
Janice replied, she says it's 70.
70 should work, yeah, because
or
I
60.
use
60, 70 or 60.
Yeah, it should work, because for bottom, for piecing, yes, that would be okay for piecing for certain, because we use 60 or 60 or 80 weight thread. I actually haven't heard of 70, but I'm sure there is some out there.
It's polyester.
Okay, that would be fine. I would assume so. Just be compatible so that you don't have to adjust your tension problems, okay? So back to this situation. This is serger thread. It's only 2-ply. It feels the same weight as this thread right here, but I want you to see, I got to get the start of it here so you can see it. This right up here, this is a Madeira quilting thread, okay? So this is designed, even though that it is, you know, the same weight, the same feel. When I put these 2 side by side and I feel them, they feel the same. This is a 3-ply thread, which means 3 strands of the filament were wound together. And if you're ever working with children and you're trying to explain some of these basics because you don't want them to have issues with, you know, information they just weren't told, is get a piece of yarn, and so you can see the plies. When you see a 3-ply yarn, you can see that there's 3 strands that are wound together, and that's what makes sense. So this is something that I can tell you, I can remember when Megan was in 4-H the very first year, and she was doing some embroidery, and I had taught her how to, she was in 3rd grade, and I had taught her how to thread the machine, and I handed her a spool of thread, just looked at the color and handed it to her, because at that time my sewing room was in my laundry room right off the kitchen. And she's probably wondering what I'm going to tell here.
Oh, no, I know this story.
Oh, you know the story. Okay, so I had handed her by mistake to do embroidery a 30 weight rayon thread, probably a sulky 30 weight rayon thread. And she started to thread it and she said, "Mom, this feels too heavy." And I'm thinking, how in the world? She's 10 years old. How would she know? And I hadn't looked at it, so I went in there and I looked at her and I said, "You're absolutely right. It's too heavy." And in embroidery, your machines are set up for 40 weight embroidery thread. And had the 30 been used, it would have probably caused some skipping and some things like that.
I was actually 8 in 3rd grade, but that's okay.
Well, it's when you started 4-H, so whatever. So anyway, that makes sense. And the difference in weights, you'll get used to them. You'll be able to look at them. When I was teaching school, I would just always tell the kids, take a spool of thread and look at it. If you see hairs coming off of all directions, it's bad thread, don't use it. Because that's basically what you want to look at.
So one more, this is with thread and tension. Peggy asked this a while back, I wrote it down. Her ruler stitches look good on the top, but they're ugly on the back.
Okay, with that, and I'm glad you asked that. Is it Peggy?
Peggy from Kansas.
All right, Peggy, I am glad you asked that because, again, there's been a lot of talk on one of the other sites that I'm on that you need to buy a special bobbin case. And realistically, you don't need to buy a special bobbin case. You need the one you have adjusted correctly for the standard straight stitch on your machine. Because if I had my pictures over here, I could show you when threads interlock, like so, to make the stitch, and you can Google this and see it, you should be able to have as much thread going up as the other thread is going down. And what I mean by that is right in the middle of your fabric. If this is the 2 layers of your fabric, right in the center here is where they should be locking their stitch. And so if you have a good straight stitch, in other words, it looks like a great stitch, in other words, it's joined in the middle when you're doing your straight stitch work, then you should have your bobbin case adjusted for anything you want to do. And so for those of you that have either forgotten or missed or maybe never even seen, that we do have information on this in our Let's Get Started video, which was like back on March 17th or something like that, that I did. I talk about tension, and I like to adjust tension. Now I can tell you, none of my machines that I have do I really ever have to adjust tension because I've got them set for a great straight stitch. But if you have to adjust tension, we want to do it all from the top. So if the tension needs adjusted, we don't go in and start taking a screwdriver and messing around with our bobbin case and all of that kind of stuff. So if you wanted to go out and buy a special bobbin case at $100 and some odd, yes, you could. But I think once you get it adjusted for your straight stitch, which is just your piecing stitch, you're going to find that you can do it all from the top. So here's what happens. If the stitches from the top are showing on the back, top stitches, top thread are showing on the back, what we call eyelashing usually, because as they go around a curve, they eyelash, they pull in. That means that the bobbin thread is winning the race. It's winning, it's pulling too hard. And so what you're going to do is you're going to increase your top tension. Go to a higher number. And just remember, tension is just a number. And this, I can tell you different stories about that, but just think of it this way. When I put on my pants, I don't care what size they are, I just want them to look good. So if it bothers me that they're a certain number in the back, I just cut that tag right out. Think of the same thing. If you have to put your tension up to 8 to get it to look good and it's normally on 5, do it. It doesn't matter. It's just a number. And then the other thing is if the bobbin thread is pulling to the top, that is one of two things. The first thing you want to check is to make sure that when you put this in here, that got hooked in this piece that goes around, or if you have one that you put in and you pull it around the case and then put the case in, you want to make sure that it's in the tension spring on that. This right here is called a tension spring. And if not, the bobbin spins around and the thread goes straight up through that hole and never around this tension spring. And so what's going to happen is it has no pull. And so the top thread wins, and it's pulling the bobbin thread up. So you want to check your bobbin thread first, because that's going to make sure that you have the right threading down there. And if you still have thread pulling to the top, then you need to reduce your top number, because the top number is, or the top thread is pulling too much. So you're going to reduce it so it has less pull, less tension on it. Now, with all of that being said, the best thing you can remember about all of this is never thread your machine with the foot down. Never thread your machine with the foot down. Because if you do, the tension disc and the top are smacked together closed, and that thread just lays right on top of that tension disc and it doesn't get in the tension. So when your machine is open, where your tension discs are open, that's when your foot is up. So when the foot is up, the tension discs are open, that thread can go right down in there, and then when you put the foot down to sew, it'll shut and it will have the right tension. Now, I'm going to tell you this because this is something that you're going to want to know about some machines. Now, this is the only one that I know of because it's the only one that I have that's like this. Obviously, I hate to tell you how many machines I have, but this is the only one that's like this. So if I unthread this, can't even get it unthreaded. That's a good sign, I guess.
We should make it a guessing game. How many machines do you think Donelle has?
Donelle wouldn't even know how to tell me how many machines. Okay, so I'm coming down. My foot is up. I've threaded it through my tension discs up here. And I'm going to put this in place. I put it in my needle threader. And now, when I get ready to thread my needle, my foot goes down. Well, it doesn't matter, because most of you probably do the same thing. You thread it, then you put your foot down so that your needle threader is in the right place. It doesn't matter because you've already threaded this ahead of the game. So for those of you that have this particular machine, this happens to be the Janome M7. The beautiful part of this is right now I've told it I'm in threading mode, and it does not close those discs. So I can just pull my thread out just like I didn't have it foot down at all. But the minute I take it out of threading mode, look what happens. I can't pull it anymore because my tension discs have closed. So I just wanted you to know, getting comfortable with your machine and knowing, how it works and how it's intended to work makes a big difference too. I've had people say, well, I'm just going to get rid of this thing because this isn't working or that isn't working. It's like, well, let's look at some things first. I'm all about selling sewing machines myself, but there are things that you can do to prevent that. Got any more questions, or am I going on to Linda's question? Okay, so Linda Martindale sent me the question. It says, I have a crosshatch curves 12-inch waves template. And she sent me a picture of this the other day, and I did say I'd never seen it before. And I haven't until she sent me this picture. So this is what it looks like. Now, knowing it's a 12-inch waves template, I looked at this and I said, okay, yeah, that's a waves template. It looks like it has waves. It looks like it has short waves, and it looks like it has big waves. So I can tell you from what I have played around with, the picture is on an angle, so I can't do, this is actually a picture. I can't do anything about that. But I would say that what she's going to be doing is she's going to make a line on her fabric. We're going to come down here and just, this is on paper, you guys. But she's going to make a line on her fabric to where she wants to start. And she's going to have a place to where it's going to line up. So there's a lot of lines on that template, but I need a straight line there. And right over in this position right here is where that part is going to go, right at this point. So you're going to be lowering your needle in here, and of course your foot's a little bit bigger here, and that's going to go there, and then she is going to be coming around this, and this is actually making a design of waves. And when you get over here to this point, this right here, at that point, is equal to this. So you're going to be able to go all the way across, And then take your template, leave your needle down, your foot down, take your template and go back and position it here and continue on across whatever you're doing. So I would play with this because, like I said, I've never seen this before, but I would play with this to decide whether I wanted to go this way with that or if I was going to turn it up and feel more comfortable going this way with it.
It depends on how you like to press your templates to the needle, right?
Right. And I can tell you from doing this, I'm thinking that this is probably the way I'm going to feel the most comfortable, is this way right here. And so basically you just have two sizes of this. This looks really distorted here because the template's laying flat. And if I could, if I could tilt it up and get something, this is going to be sticking up farther. It's not so low and lazy like this. It's actually just a smaller version of this side. So I'm going to ask Linda to play with it like that this week and report back to me so that I can share with you guys next week.
Well, Linda has a question. She just popped on and said that all makes a lot of sense, but it's called a cross-hatching wave. So what does cross-hatching have to do with it?
I believe it's just part of those tools that were in that, because it's just like the spin effects. I don't know if you guys know, but the word spin effects has nothing to do with anything spinning. Spin effects is a flower in Australia, and Leonie just named a group of templates after that flower. So when you see something that says spin effects or circles on quilts or crosshatch, it may or may not. I mean, think about it. This is waves, okay? So you are using waves. The crosshatch part may have to do with the way these lines are lined up and how you can, make designs off of those lines. But this is definitely a wave. And it just may be a series that's called crosshatch. I have no idea. But the thing that I want to tell you is don't get bogged down in names. Because I know sometimes I'll tell people it's a circle on quilts template, and they're like, I don't want a circle. I know you don't want a circle, but it's part of the circles on quilts template, and it's really not going to even be a circle. So don't get bogged down in those names. And when I saw this, I'm thinking, okay, I can understand why Linda got confused, because if it says crosshatch, you're thinking of like this. I'm doing crosshatching. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go the other way. Well, I don't think you're going to be doing that with waves. So I hope that helps, Linda. I hope that makes some sense out there.
I told her to play with it and report back because we're really curious to see how it turns out.
Yes, we are. Okay, the next question I'm going to answer is from Susan Digman. And Susan asked, I would like to add borders to my quilt as you go. In other words, those of you that were with me a couple weeks ago, I don't know when it was, I showed you how to do the quilt as you go method, and that's what she's referencing. Do I use the same method as your previous class? Please help. Okay, so what I did is I dug out from my previous class, and I'm just going to go ahead and put my glider on here. Today was laundry day for gliders, and they're kind of hanging out all over the bathroom.
It's almost worse than when you have to launder all your undergarments because they're hanging all over our bathroom, people.
Now she's told my secrets. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, this is what I showed when I was showing you how to do the quilt as you go method. So we had two pieces that we did. You can see them here. And then we put them together, and this is actually a method. I did it up here with white thread so you could see it, but then I changed it to the matching thread so you can see I do mine all by machine. So on the back it looks like this. You are going to have a stitch line that is going to be showing, but if I was normally doing this, I would have matched my back. And I was just using scraps. So now we're going to pretend that we got this row and we got another row up here, and they're all joined, because I think what Susan's saying is, but I want borders on this. I don't want to just bind this. So what I'm going to show you is how I have done this, and I think you'll see that it really makes a lot of sense. Now you could either use that, the tool, the Sashley tool. I personally just put on a regular foot. So I'm not going to be doing any sewing right here, but I am going to show you how I would set this up. So I'm going to have my border, because I decided that Susan wanted a 3-inch border. And if we had a piece in here, obviously it would come over that top piece. I just have one layer here. And so I've got a 3-inch finished border. And I have my batting. So I've cut my batting 3 inches also. And I'm laying these all right nice and sandwiched together. Now I like to take my backing piece and cut it wider, my back border. It's wider. This is on the top. My back one, I'm going to be putting right side up on the back. So I'm going to put that right on there like so. I should have got out my Sashley tool so I could show you this. But since I don't have it, I will just get a piecing foot here. Another great feature of my Westerly wish table is having that nice big drawer to hold all my feet. So I'm going to take this foot off and I'm going to put my regular foot on here. And some of you are probably wondering, are you going to do more than 1/4 of an inch? Yes, I am. I'm going to do about 3/8 of an inch because I want it just a smidge bigger than that. Now, if you've worked in your design where this is centered and you need to, you're going to have to stay with your 1/4 of an inch. But I'm not in that situation with this one. So I've got this all pinned together. And I don't like to sew over pins, so I'm only putting one in there because I don't really want to mess that much with it. And I'm going to lower my foot. Now I've got my machine set for a standard straight stitch. I've got my border, and I've got my batting, and I've got the back piece that's going to be actually part of my backing, all there together. And I am going to start stitching. I'm going to go ahead and reverse because I don't want this to come out.
So you said 3/8 of an inch. What about our metric people? Do you know how much that is?
It's just a little bit more than 1/4. So I don't know for sure. I probably should know those metric measurements, but I don't.
So Susan's on and she asked, could she quilt the border separate and then add it to the quilt like you're doing it?
No.
Okay.
It would not go through the backing. Okay? It would be okay to do it that way, and you'll see why in just a second what I'm going to say here. So what I've done here, this is my quilt as you go because this is all quilted. You can see it's through to the backing. You can see my design there. And so now what I have right here is I have my backing, so to speak. It's actually the back of my border. I have my batting, and if this is a very thick batting, you're then going to want to go in here and you're going to want to trim this out a little bit. This is not a thick one, but I'll trim it out. And you can see, these are why I love these scissors. You see the ends there? I can go right down there and it is not cutting into, or the tips are not getting caught in my batting whatsoever. So I can trim that right off there, and I'm going to lay my batting back. Don't put an iron to your batting, but my little roller, Megan, it's right there. I would get out my little roller like this, and I would just run that across there. And you can see now, it's like, okay, Donelle wins. I don't have to go anywhere else. And then you can lay this right back over it. So in the Quilt As You Go method, you basically put a border on Quilt As You Go also. Because now that's all finished. I think of it as, I would have had a sashing here that connected my rows, but now I have an additional border. Now's when you would quilt that. If you wanted to, I suppose you could quilt these two together, but then it's not going to be quilted through your backing
Well, and
here.
Mary added, this is a great idea too, that if you've already got your quilted border, you would just need to add a sashing strip to it.
Right. If you'd already quilted it, you'd just be putting the sashing strip there. So one of the reasons I like to leave extra is, depending on your project, you can bring your back to the front to form your binding there. Some of you saw me doing that last week. So you're wanting to know what these are. These are my snippies, and these are, I believe, called lace trim. It's on my website. I'm not sure. It's lace trim, and you can look there to get the name of it and then go to your local quilt store and, you know, ask them for it. But these are just like the ones that I use in template quilting. You've seen me use those many times. They're just like, you know, brother and sister, except one of them has the rounded paddles and the other one has the points so that we can snip right up there for the template quilting. So yes, that's a way that you can do add-on borders. And while we're talking about I hope that answered your question, yep. Susan. But while we're talking about fabric, there was also in one of the other quilting sites, there was a question about to tear fabric or to cut fabric. Now, I could talk for hours on this. I'm going to keep it short, and I'm not trying to open up a can of worms. But tearing fabric when you buy it is the best. And that's because when you tear it, you get it on grain. Now, if it comes off of the bolt and one spot is here and the other's here after it's been torn, it doesn't matter because I can pull it to get it back on grain. You can actually, if you buy a 1/4 yard of fabric that has been cut, you can lose 4.5 inches of that trying to straighten it out. So the only reason I'm talking about it right here is because if you go in to purchase, and the biggest one that is a mess is backing, and they cut your backing, I'm sure your long armor's having a fit. Because if they tear it, you're going to get a true amount of fabric. So, you know, if you want more information on that, just send us some notes here, and maybe I'll just do a 15-minute demo at one of these times to show you exactly what I mean by that, because I've taught that a lot, because it goes back to how fabric is made. And when you tear it, it's definitely on grain. Yes, I know like 3/8 of an inch gets ruined on the edge from the tears, or what we look at is how it gets abraded. But it's better to have that and have a perfect, you know, something that's on grain. I had a question from a lady, and I can't remember whether it was on this site or another site, but she was talking about, so Megan, right over there, I've got like 5 or 6 little squares of fabric cut. And she said, do you worry, and maybe this was last week when we were talking about it, so whoever that, I think it was, it's back against the wall there, Megan. There's just like 4 or 5 little squares of fabric. Yep, that's it. All right, and it was, because I'm pretty sure it was last week. I can tell you, because I have a trained eye in this, because this is my background, that I can tell you exactly how this is grained here. I mean, this is straight up and down. If this fabric had been cut instead of torn to get started, these threads might not be straight up and down. They may be a little like this. And then to extend that even further, you can have fabric and you put this side by side. Now, that's not a flower, okay? There's no way I'm going to find probably what exactly, because that doesn't match up either. But I can tell you, I can tell whether something should go vertical or it should go horizontal. This one needs to go this way, not this way. And for some of you, that doesn't matter. And for some fabrics, it doesn't matter. But for other fabrics, it does matter, because you just get a different look going different directions. Now that's getting a little nitpicky in there, but I can tell you that it does make a difference when you're working with your fabrics. So just a little added piece of information. Do we have another question?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so that was that one. Have I answered this one? And did I answer that one?
Your done questions.
Those are my done questions. Okay, so Diana has a question. When quilting a lap size or larger, do you recommend doing stitch in the ditch before doing motifs? If I have 1-inch sashing, is it best to quilt them before larger blocks or wait and quilt them last? Okay, I will tell you, to answer that first, is don't determine what you're going to do on your quilt just by the fact that, okay, somehow I got to hold this sandwich together. Because that then kind of cuts into what can make that quilt beautiful. Because if you have all of this stitching in the ditch just to hold your fabric together, you may be totally ruining the design that could come out of that. Now, if stitching in the ditch is what makes it look good, go for it. There's no problem with that. But I will tell you, stitching in the ditch, even though we have tools for it, it's not that difficult to stitch in the ditch with our templates, but it's not showing off your handiwork, so to speak. And so the only reason I say that is I don't want you to say, okay, well, every single quilt I've got to put sashing on it and stitch in the ditch, because that gets kind of boring. If we had stitched in the ditch on our buttons and bows last week, we would have had a lot of stitching on there before we ever did any designing, and those stitches may have interrupted the designs that we wanted. Now, this kind of goes along with the next question that I'm going to be answering. I won't give it away yet, but it has to do with how you put your fabrics together. So I am a spray person, and I can tell you that I probably would not have remained in business for the last 20 years of my business if I'd not found spray. Because I had a lot of customers that are just like me. I do not want to have to put a needle and thread to that to baste it together. I don't want to mess with pens. I don't want to have to do those safety pins and then put the pin mores on the end. I just don't want to mess with all of that. And so I can say that I am a spray person. And for those of you that have not Googled how to put your quilts together easily with spray, put in there pool noodle, and I'm talking noodle, like chicken and noodle. Pool noodle quilt basting. Because that will get you as far as you need to go, and then a bunch of things will pop up. Because you can wrap your top on a pool noodle. You can wrap your batting on a pool noodle. You can wrap your backing on a pool noodle. And if you do it all right, you can put your quilt together on an 8-foot table with just like one other person helping you, because you've put those together on pool noodles, and then all you have to do is unroll them, spray a little bit, roll it up, unroll some, and it makes it very easy to do. Now, I don't recommend breathing that spray, but since we're all wearing masks anyway, throw on a mask and you can do that. I don't like to even do it in the house. I would go outside. I will take a table and pull it out into the driveway. I also make sure that there's no wind that day because I don't want it all over the siding of my house. But I'm not here to promote any particular brand. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I get paid by no one. I use what I like. I get paid by no one. Now, if you want to put in a good word for me so I can get some endorsements, that would be great too. But Megan, if you want to get over there by the iron, I have my basting spray. My basting spray is the one I like that doesn't affect me, and I have allergies and I get asthma. The one I like is the Quilt Basting Spray by June Taylor. And it sticks with a little bit of stuff, and it doesn't have a high smell factor, is what I'm trying, I guess, to say. And the thing that I like is I can just use this. I'm not going to spray it. Don't worry about it. But I can just use this and not have nasty all over my fingernail. If you have used a spray without, like all my other sprays that I use, and I'm not going to bash anybody's spray, okay? But the other sprays that I used, I would go to Lowe's or Home Depot and get what they call a can gun. And it's what you put on a spray paint bottle. And I would use that, and you would have all this nasty stuff all over the place. And I would, if I didn't have that, I'd have it on my finger. I don't have it with this particular one. So I like that. I like to do the spray basting. If you like to pen and you're okay with it, that's fine. Getting back to the question that Di asked, and that is, do you have to do all of that other stuff first? I really just encourage you to think about what you want to quilt on your quilt, and if that part is part of the quilting, yeah, go ahead and do that first. But I would certainly make sure that I had everything all nice and flat and make sure that it was all, where it needs to be, because once you put a line of stitching here and a line of stitching there, this fabric in here has got nowhere else to go. Megan, did you have a question?
I don't, but Sharon did, and I missed it. It was back when you were talking about fabric and tearing. She said a lot of dealers will not tear, so how much extra do they need to buy?
That's a great question, and if you couldn't, I think you can all hear Megan, is if you have a sewing machine store that won't tear, and a lot of them won't, I honestly understand that. They won't. I don't understand that, but I know that they don't. And she's asking how much extra should you buy? I would buy at least 1/4 yard so that you could then tear one end. You don't have to tear both ends, you just tear one end. And I'll try to find a piece of fabric this week that's really off grain so that we can show you in a real short demo next week why I say that, and it'll make...
Nina's asked for that, so I wrote that down too.
Okay, I will do a demo of this next week so that you understand, but if you buy an extra 1/4 yard, you should be good on that. Okay, so I hope that answered you, Di, as far as, what we're saying on whether you should stitch in the ditch. I had a lady ask, should she stitch all the way around the outside? No, I don't think you need to do that either. The other thing that you can do is if you want to be a pinner, you can obviously leave your center place where you're going to be stitching first, get it all good and flat, and kind of do all your pinning out in the other area. And then as you work your way across, you can start taking those pins out so that they don't get in your way, and you should be okay. Now I have found, and for those of you that want to go back and look at it, because I gave a demo on this, I have found the weightless quilter to be the ticket when you have something as large as a twin size quilt or larger, because you are going to be able to then have the weight of that quilt up, so you're not going to catch the back, you're not going to have something flop underneath and you've quilted. I've had this before where, I've had people who have contacted me and they're like, I did beautiful quilting, but the whole extra edge was flapped under and then I had to rip all of that out. And so that just takes it, so it's not a fun experience. So I hope, Di, that answers your question, because it goes right along.
I got a real quick one, and Becky's been waiting. When you are using the Pounce iron-on chalk, do you have to use steam to remove that, or just a hot iron?
It usually removes with a hot iron, but steam won't hurt it. Okay? She's asking about the chalk, and I'm going to get to that because I think Megan said that was another one that we had questions on. So I'm going to answer her. Carol asked, I have a question for you. What rulers and how would you quilt around applique blocks that are already pieced together in a quilt? She says, I have it pinned and ready to quilt. Would love some recommendations. Okay? So she sent me some pictures. So this is a picture of one of the blocks. Okay, so she's appliqued that on there. Now this could be applique, or this could be embroidery, this could be anything. And I hope, Carol, that you don't mind that I'm going to give you a little hint. On this block here, most of you can tell there's a little bit of a shadowing through from her megaphone. If she had put, Carol, the next time you do this, put a piece of interfacing on the back of this, or just simply fuse 2 layers of the white together or 2 layers of the fabric together. And before you start with your applique, lay it down on what you're going to put it on and see. Is it still shadowing through? Because I've had that happen, and I have had to put like 2 layers of a fusible interfacing on the back to keep that from shadowing through. Now in this case, it's not great. I'm just telling you, I know that people like to have information on how can they keep this from happening, and that's why I wanted to tell you. So she's got that one. She's got this one that has, I don't know whether this is an embroidery or an applique on there. And then she sent me this one. So we evidently have some little girl in this, because this little elephant here has bows on it. And these are already all appliqued, and she's got things pinned together. Now, we've already talked about pinning and stitching in the ditch and that kind of thing. But what she's asking about is, what rulers would you use? When we look at something like this, this is your focal point of your block. So you can decide, what do I want to do around here? Now, you free motioners out there that have that down pat, wow, I'm jealous because I'm not a free motioner. You could probably come in here and do all kinds of fun things with your free motion. Now, I will tell you, I have some templates in the works, and hopefully they're going to be around soon, that are called background fills. And so what it's going to be are templates that you can use for the backgrounds of this. So I can't tell you a whole lot more right now, but I hope we're going to see them before Christmas. And they are going to be able to be used for background fills. But if I was doing this right now, and this is my quilt, and I'm assuming this is a cornerstone here, I can't quite tell what's in the cornerstone. It looks like maybe it's a piece of, maybe it's a fussy cut piece. I don't know, maybe she's appliqued in there too, I'm not sure, maybe embroidery, whatever. But I would look at what's in the cornerstones, and I would probably make that the center of whatever I might be doing. So like last week when we did the buttons and bows, we used the center of the bow and then made circles around it. Or we used the template that looked like this, and it's actually was the circles on wreath template. And this could be the center and that could be in there. And so what I'm saying with that is you could have some of your design that's touching 4 different squares as you're doing this. And then you've got to figure out, okay, so if I did this, I don't know, this is probably a 10 or a 12-inch square, I imagine. And so if you do this, maybe all of this is taken care of by this particular one, and then you would move over and all of that's taken care of, and you may not have a whole lot of in here to work with. But I can tell you, I feel your pain. Let's see, who was I? This is Carol. I feel your pain because this is the hardest part for me. And I will say that in most cases, once I just sit down and get started quilting, then I have a better idea what I need and what I want. Sometimes I thoroughly overplan it. I set it, I lay it down, I plan everything out. I don't know if I still have my piece here from last week, but you can see how I just set it up on, with those of you that were with me last week for buttons and bows, you can see how I just drew it out on the computer, and I was just kind of designing as I went that way. That works too. But sometimes you can overthink on paper, and if you just started out with the fabric and started playing with it, then you would, you wouldn't have the issues of trying to fill in those extra spaces because you pretty much did it as you were using some of the templates that you already had. Now, I can tell you I have probably 3 times as many templates that I've never used as to the ones that I have used. And so sometimes it's a matter of, I just tell Megan, go over there and find a template and hand it to me. And she'll get a template out, and I have no clue what I'm doing with it, but I just play with it on paper with my stitching line desk, and I figure out something that I like, and then I go do some quilting with it. But, many times, if you look, we have like 500 different templates, and when you count up all the different sizes, I mean, it's just unbelievable, all the things that we have. And so it's like, you're not going to have all of those. I've told several people I could spend probably 6 months in classes at least 3 times a week and never exhaust everything that I could do in the sampler set. So, it's just a matter of playing. But on something like this, it kind of, you want to look at it, is it for a boy? Is it for a girl?
And it's for her daughter for Christmas.
It's for her daughter for Christmas, okay? So I look at this and I see, well, elephants, kind of circus, carousel. The one we did last week would probably be a pretty good one. Get one of the larger ones, maybe the 11.5, and start with the center down here in the cornerstone and let that carousel. Now, if you get the one that's like this, you are going to have, where's my template? You're also going to have the echo spot up here that you can work with. And so you can echo just like that. So, you're going to have a lot of different things that you can play with. I would tell you, and I can't remember who, Megan and I looked at it and we almost printed it off and I forgot about it. But somebody submitted on Westerly by me, and you can see it on there, that they had finished theirs from last week, their buttons and bows, and they used several sizes of that Circles on Quilts Wreath 16. And so there's a lot of sizes of it. When you get it, you're probably going to want to get all sizes because that way you can do a lot of filling in. Would I quilt over the elephants? Would I quilt over the letter A? No, I wouldn't quilt over those myself.
Some of the other people have put up some great suggestions, like echo quilting around.
Right.
Or,
and that's what I was going to say. You could use your Circles on Quilts and make a circle around that and then echo from that. Or, you know, like I said, there's just tons of different things. So fill in there, you guys. If you've got a suggestion, help her out with that.
Now, along with that, Regina asked, what size template do you recommend for just old-fashioned piecing? Because she's not sure how often she would use a 9.5 or an 11.
Are you talking about size template?
I think so, yes.
Okay. You're probably going to stay within the, 6 to 7 inch, something like that. But it's just a matter of what size you got to work with for sure. A lot of times people just always are working with 12-inch blocks, and so you've got bigger spaces to fill in. Now, the last question I have to ask or answer, I'm not sure where my piece got to, but it was a great question. No, Megan, it's the there we go. So, and I can't remember, Sharon Smith. And I know several Sharon Smiths, but I don't think you're one of them that I've probably ever met. So Sharon sent me a template. And she said, this is a template I've bought. How could I work with this? And this is great because I will tell you, these are not expensive at all. And the cool part about this is you're just going to use this for your idea and your spacing and that kind of thing. So what I did is I taped that template. Obviously, it's just a picture because that's what she sent me. I taped it on to a bigger piece of paper. Now, if you look at this right here and you wanted to make a flower that was similar to this, you can see that that's 6. So at that point, you're going to pull out your 6-point crosshair square. And if you want it to be just like this, what you're going to be doing, I'm just using an ink pen here. Maybe I'll get my purple marker so they can see better. So I'm planning this on paper at this point. So I've got my mark here. And all I would need to do then would be to cross my center here so that I've got my center point. And in this situation, I would just look at my templates. What do I have that looks like that? Well, I've got my Spinning Wheels 36 that comes from my sampler set, and I've got my Spinifex 4 that comes from my sampler set. You can see it there. So I could use either one of those, and they're going to be pretty close to that same particular size and shape. So I would draw this so that I could put that onto my fabric, and then I would do that particular design. Now, obviously, I'm going to figure this all out first, but then I'm looking at this going, what in the world am I going to do for that? Well, in my sampler set, I have a couple of different curves.
And did you also say that as you're tracing this, they would use their stitching line discs? They don't just trace their
Right
template.
now, I'm just using markings. Okay, I'm not drawing anything yet. Okay, I'm just giving myself an idea where I'm going to put stuff. So I'm going to use this particular one, and then this one, and I also have another one that I just got this week. It's one of the back-to-backs. I meant to get it out ahead of time. This is a pretty cool template. It's not a back-to-back. This is called the Mini Multi-Arc Template. And I just got this. So Megan, you want to give me a piece of black fabric because that's the only way they're going to see it. So this is what it looks like. So you can see it's got a lot of different sizes of arcs on it that I can play with. And no one said we have to do the whole thing. I'm looking at this going, look at that, you guys. I could come right from where I finished this I could put my needle in there, and then that would stitch to that, and then I just flip this around, and I'm going to stitch over here, and then I'm going to do something smaller. I'm going to need another smaller template to do this. So basically what I'm using this template for is my whole idea. So if that fits in there, and I'll probably use this somewhere along the line because I don't have to have the stencil, I'm not actually going to mark it. So I'm going to take my ruler here, and lo and behold, I've got my center. So you can see that went from that center right through that center there. And basically what it is I would have that marked on my border if that's what I'm doing this with. And you can see that I use several different templates. And right from here, I would bury my needle right there. I hope you can see that. I would line this up, and if it's 1/4 inch, I would come over here and I would decide, okay, that's where I need to stop. So on my fabric, I would be marking at 3 3/4. This is 3 3/4. So when I use this, I would come to that line and I would stop. And then I would flip this around. Maybe it was my other one. I don't know which one. I guess it was this one I used. So I would stitch to right there, and then I would flip this around, and I'm sure that this is measuring the same thing to get to this center, and I would actually stitch clear to that center. And then I would use another template to do this one. So it's a matter of, this is a great way to get started on your own creativity, because you've got probably kind of a shell of an idea here, and then all you're doing is finding what templates you have to match this up. Now these kind of look like leaves. Well, I'm going to tell you, if you put this right here and that right there off of there is going to pretty much look like that leaf. So you could use that as that particular template. So you can play around with your templates and you can get that.
So would you add the leaves as you go, or would you do it after you've done that curve?
I would do it afterwards because I want this to be all one smooth line. So definitely a good question, but I would do it afterwards. So I hope that helps, Sharon, in what you're seeing there, because when I looked at this, I thought this was about a 12.5 inch design, and that's what it looks like to be. I don't know what you have it as, but we blew it up so we could show it here to the class today, and I'm probably going to use this on something sooner or later, because I will tell you, I'm not creative like this. I'm not one that can figure out all of these different things. So spending the $4 or $5 to get this on a template plastic to then be able to make it so I could use it really is a great idea. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Sharon, because I can say I really hadn't thought about doing that until you showed that. Now, last but not least today, somebody asked about, and I wish I could remember who it was, so pipe in there if it was you, how do I get my continuous heart border to line up? And this is the continuous heart template right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my chalk, and remember I am using iron off chalk in a clover marker. So what I did is I took my clover marker that looks like this, I emptied the chalk out, and I refilled it with Pounce iron off chalk. So now when I'm finished, that will all iron off. So I guess it would be a good idea to set my machine for ruler work.
While you're doing that, I'm going to change the camera direction as well.
So I need to put my other foot on. My machine automatically lowers the feed teeth. There was some questions this week about if I have a machine that does not lower the feed teeth, what can I do? Well, sometimes those machines come with a little metal plate that fits over the feed teeth, and if you have that, you would fit that over your feed teeth, and then you would actually use the glider that only has the little hole in it so that that can set up on top of that metal piece. So you might have a piece that fits on there. This one doesn't have it, but you see these two little holes? You might have something like that, and that metal piece fits right in those holes. All right, so that's a little bit of a hint on how you can do that. Now, here's what I have worked out with this template. Now, this template comes in several different sizes. This is the larger one, and all I have to do the smaller one is untape this. Well, I like to hold on to this whole big piece when I'm doing the larger one, so I'm going to use the whole big piece. But if you were doing the smaller one, this is the one that you would be using. Like I said, I like to hold on to the whole big piece. And here's what I have learned. When I'm doing this, if I'm going to be moving this direction, moving to the right, then the heavy part of the template is on the right to start with. If I'm going to be moving to the left, then I put the heavy top or the heavy side this way to start with. This template has stable tape on both sides because no matter which direction I'm moving, I have to flip and flop. Okay? So I'm going to start right here. I have a line that I've lined up. I'll move it up so you can see it. There's my line. I've lined this up, and I'm going to start right down here at the bottom. Now, I haven't selected ruler work yet. There we go. So when I put my foot down, it was clear down. I couldn't move anything. So I'm going to take my needle down, my needle up, and because I just put that bobbin in, when I go underneath there, it's just a little tiny tail. You might have to use tweezers to get a hold of it. I got it out there so I can still see it. Now, I don't like to reset that right close to that template, so I'm going to set that back in so I can see right where my needle goes, and everything is lined up. So I'm right on that line, and I've got this out of the way. And I'm going to stitch up to there. Now, I failed to adjust my speed, so I'm going to set my speed down a little bit farther because I'm one of those that sets it at medium and turns my foot pedal around to the back. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out, I'm going to flip this over, and I'm lining this up again. And I'm coming back down to that line. I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to line up again so that it's right on that line. Always making sure that my needle is down. Now, here's where I assume, I can't remember who I'm answering question for. It seems like it's Cheryl, but maybe that's not right. Here's where I am needing to measure because this is what your question is. I can line this up on this line, but what about this space right here? That's what we're trying to get to be the same. So if I come over here, you can see that that's more than 1/4 inch. So it must be that that's 1/2 inch. I'm not sure, but it looks like it. So it looks like these overloop a little bit. And I'm going to pick this up. I would have to look in the book. And this is why you definitely want a good amount of stable tape, because you want these to not move on you, and you've got all of these different ways to lining this up. Now that first one was like 1/2 inch. This one is not near that, so I'm going to see what works so that I can actually answer her question, because it looks like this has moved on me a little bit. And it may take another one to determine the answer to what she's asking. I wouldn't take that out. Those are pretty close to the same size. But to answer fully what she's asked me, I am definitely going to work on a good answer. So I'm flipping this over. And I think that's exactly what it's supposed to be right there. So let's see. If I turn this around so that y'all can see. I'm trying to see over here because sometimes there's a place to line up, and I wanted to resolve this while I was showing you so you could see how I figure this out. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to get, because when I was using the small one I used that, I'm going to get one of my arrows and I'm going to place it on there. Because it looks like that when we're doing this, this should be positioned at the bottom of the heart from the one before. So let's see how it goes to see how that works and see if we're right. But this is the way you're going to play with it before you actually get to an actual project so that you know what you're trying to line up.
Okay, so it's actually, I think it's Jeanne, is that?
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And she just said she's looking forward to your answer here because what she did is looking just like what you're doing.
Okay.
And only one heart of her strip actually lines up.
Okay. So what I'm doing here, it is going to be this. This is right. Okay. So what I'm doing here, she's going to adjust the camera here, is I'm making sure I'm on my line, and that little spot right there is at the base of what I would call the last completed heart. Now, is that line on the template? Well, yes, as a matter of fact it is. It's right there. But do you want to have to look for it each time? No. So that's why I've got my arrow there. And you can see how just that little bit of a twist, I wasn't right on my line, and so now I am. We're lined up. And now it looks pretty much like we can just kind of go to town, so to speak, but making sure that we leave our needle in place so that we don't get out of that spot. And right there, I just moved it ever so slightly, ladies and gentlemen. And you can see that that lined up again. And we get right back to our line because you want to stay on this line too. And sometimes I think, just like what I said, I wanted to resolve this on the screen because I wanted you to see what I go through to get to an answer so that you'll know how you can do it. So these hearts actually do have a little bit of an overlap when they're stitched. So I hope that that's helped you there, because you can see by my doing that, I'm getting that same overlap as we go along there. So at that point, it's from, I don't know how to say it, from the bottom of this small heart, it's the second line over. I've covered my line up with an arrow there. So I hope that that makes sense for what you need to know with that. But if you're going to be moving to the right, when you start, you're going to start with all of the work or all of the template to the right. If you're going to be moving to the left, start this way, because I've sat down and I've flipped this and flopped it and tried to figure out which way I need to go. And it just makes sense that that's what you're going to do. Now, I have one more thing to tell you.
Is this the hearts template?
This is the continuous hearts border.
So Jana said, can you use the heart border with the hearts template? Is that a different template?
You're going to get a different look.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to get a different look. So what I want to show you here is I'm going to break this thread. And I want to show you something.
Are you going to be able to show them how to do a corner with this?
No, I can't do that on the spur of the knot.
Okay.
I'm not that good, guys. I wish I were. Maybe somebody else is, but I'm not. So what I'm going to do here is I put this arrow here because what I want is I don't want this leg when I start. So I'm going to set my foot down so that my needle is right down in that line, okay? That's where I would normally start. But in the case of this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that thread out of there. I'm going to have this lined up, but I'm going to come up right to that spot right there. Put my needle down, and so that way when I do this, yes, I would have pulled my thread up. But what's going to happen is this is going to come right beside that. So I don't have that leg down there where it's starting. And that's why I love ruler stickers. Because once I find out where I've got things, I can just leave those on there and know where I need to be. So I'm going to lay this back in place.
So tell me again, why did you not have that extra leg? Is that just a different way to start it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you can see now, if I tied this off, you know, obviously if I was really going to do something, I would tie it off. But so now where I've started, I don't have that extra leg hanging there. And when I come back around to the end, I just don't stitch this part on. So you just don't have that extra piece. And all I did to figure that out, you guys, was I took my template and I put it up against that to see where that needed to be. Because this is the side I started on. I went this way first. So when I started, I only started right in that position. So I hope that helps you. I will say that that's why I wanted to do a Q&A today, because there's a lot of little things that you encounter along the way that you're like, man, I wish I had somebody I could ask that a question of. So don't hesitate to keep a little. Do you see my little notepad? You guys have to see it. This is what I had for today to tell me what I needed. I have on there clean machine, clean the template, bobbin winding, the sewology thread. Keep a little notebook or something right beside there so that you have that information. Now, last but not least, we had someone ask what markers iron off and what don't and all that kind of stuff. Now, this is the white chalk. And you can see, I'm just going to take my iron, that iron's right off, okay? Yeah, I have a red bobbin thread, don't worry about that, okay? So that iron's right off. No matter what fabric I put it on, this is my iron off chalk. I got it on there, it irons off. Now, if I have a fabric that I would need to mark and I can't, I can't see my lines or I can't do this or whatever. Let's say I was marking on this one. Yes, I can use the chalk. There's no problem with that. But maybe I need more exact lines than what I can get with my chalk. And so in that case, I would use either a fine line or our markers. I'm going to get that one on the floor. That are from Frixon. Now what I've done here is this fabric has been sprayed with Best Press or Starch Savvy and pressed. It's been sprayed again and pressed. And so now it has a, just kind of like a barrier. If you think of it, it's almost like you just put a piece of wax paper over it. So now when we mark, I'm going to use black on here so you can see it. Hopefully you can see that line. Pretty interesting that it's almost out. I've used a black marker on there, and I'm going to be able to iron that right off when I'm finished. Because this Frixion pen, who the poor thing has taken so many bad stories about it, this Frixion pen never had a chance to get to the fabric because it's still laid up on top of the Best Press or the Starch Savvy. So don't be afraid to use these tools if you use some sort of a barrier between there. So I can use the fine line. I'm going to pull this up so you can see. I don't even know if you can. Yeah, you can. You can see how fine that line is. These are the ones that I normally use because the finer the line, the more accurate you can be. And these are all Frixion fine line pens. You can buy them individually. You can buy them in a package. But I know that on the package it says they're not for fabric, and I know all those stories. But just let me tell you, I have done white on white quilts, and I have used black markers, and I have sprayed it, and I have not had any issues. Now, if you do, usually all you have to do is spritz it with water anyway, and then press it off. So you don't have to wash it. You can just spritz it with water, and it'll come right off. So I hope that answers those questions, because I know some of you had them. I will tell you that over on my, Megan, which Facebook page is it? Is it about the markers? Is that on All Things?
That's on All Things Quilting and Sewing.
All Things Quilting and Sewing with Donelle McAdams. There is actually about a 6-minute little tutorial there. We even took it and put it in the freezer so you could see the line situation, whether it's going to come back when it gets cold. So, with
Hold
that...
on, before you go, Karen said pins or markers. Tell the difference between
Okay.
pins or markers.
All right. Don't use the pins because, first of all, the pins are metal tip and they will abrade your fabric. That was the originals. This is a pen. You can see it's a metal tip.
So that's what we used before, but now we've learned.
Now we've learned our lesson, and so now we use the felt tips. Either this one, which is called a marker, or the other one, which is called a fine line. And they come in a bunch of different colors. And why would I use that when I could use chalk? Because I can't get chalk as accurate as I can get those lines when I'm trying to go for accurate. Now, next week, we're going to be doing this project. This is called Trim the Table. It doesn't have to be for Christmas. This one is for Christmas. And they carry this pattern at Sew Steady, or you can get it from your local quilt shop, or you can get it from my website. So I would encourage you to get the pattern before next week, because like I told you, I know Sew Steady has it. On the back, it tells you how much to get if you're wanting 2, 4, 8 placemats. But I would encourage you to wait before you did any cutting, because I'm going to be showing you some tricks that are different. I mean, yes, I wrote this pattern, but I'm going to show you some things that are different for doing this, because guess what? When I wrote this pattern, I didn't think about doing any kind of quilting with it, and we're going to quilt on it. So down here where it says fusible fleece, that is the best. I use Pellon 987F. There are other brands, but you want a fusible fleece that is fusible on one side only. One side only, not both sides. And so that information is there. I'm not going to be talking about the napkins, but, well, yeah, I can. I can show you how to make the napkins. So you may not even want to get the napkins, but if you want to make it so it is an ornament, that fits in up there. I believe next week when we're doing this, we will probably leave that off because I want to make this so it could be all seasons. So this is called Trim the Table by SewBiz. And I believe the pattern is $8 or $9. I'm not sure, but I love this down here. No hand stitching. And so we're going to show you how to use this pattern in a lot of different ways. And you can either sew along with us if you get your stuff, or you can wait. Like I said, I really wouldn't encourage you to cut until after we talk about it next week. I had no idea, you guys, we would go this long with just doing questions and answers. I hope you've enjoyed it. I love sharing information that's going to make you better at what you love to do. And so if those of you that need me to do a FaceTime call, or you have more questions, please just put them right down there, because we want to help you with that. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we will see you next week at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Bye now.